Folks, I have 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is an adjourned meeting from our prior regular meeting that we have. And at this time, I would ask that you bow your heads for the invocation. Dear Lord, we wish to thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to gather here this evening to be able to discuss the business of our town. Lord, we ask that you guide and direct us as we attempt to do your will and to do those things which are in the best interests of the lake and the citizens of the lake. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. The next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Anyone attending is welcome to join in. I would ask Commissioner Evans if you would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we've got a work session set for tonight in a regular adjourned meeting. I have not heard from Dean or is that Dean coming up now? Okay, I hadn't heard. That's just a reflection. I hadn't heard from Dean or Tom, so I'm assuming that they will be Sunday night. Well, he may not be here then. We haven't heard anything from him. We'll see if Dean shows up. Got the flu? Okay, well, he probably won't be able to join us. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We've got on here the lake management proposal, and Sean, I'll turn it over to you at this time to go ahead and go forward with our information that we have on.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. So tonight we'll start off with a presentation from Diane Lawrenson. She's got some information that she wants to share before we discuss the specific proposal. She does have a PowerPoint prepared, and we'll have that up here on the screen for folks to be able to follow along with that. And once she's done with her presentation, we'll come back to the actual proposal and walk through the items that are included in that proposal for discussion.
This is posted on the website. And some other information that I'll be talking about. Some other information that I have included as well. So just really short, but there's some information that didn't get included in the big binders that you guys got from Jim Perry and the Lumber River Council of Governments. So these are two things from that report. Any lake management plan requires two elements: management of the lake in terms of implementing changes in use or altering activities that take place on and around the lake, and then also setting up long-term monitoring activities to deal with the issues surrounding water quality, lake levels, and other identified issues that can be measured over time. So if you're following along, to move to the next slide on the website, you just come down and hit next. So what did not get included was some information from 1981 and 1982, and 1980 and 1981 was a drought period, and that impacted the lake level. And so there was a meeting held, a quite large meeting held in February 1981 over in Elizabethtown. And this is an article from the Fayetteville Observer that was written after attending that meeting. So these are all words taken from the article. Oft repeated fears of falling water levels concerns about number of boats and kinds of boats damaging the lake, and concluded the article by saying, two things above all others were obvious at this Wednesday night session. There's concern about the lake, and there will be disagreements about how to best eliminate these concerns. Next, please, Pat. There were state representatives at this meeting, and they talked some, and then they agreed to go back and do some more studying and wrote up a report, and again concluded that the water levels were low because of the drought conditions. And they also said in this document that the representative from the Wildlife Resources Commission that was there at the meeting explained that local governments have the authority to request changes in boating regulations when needed. These requests should be addressed to the WRC, which has the authority to consider them and to take appropriate action. Next slide, please, Pat. These were the conclusions that I developed as part of my contribution to the Lumber River COGS report. The lake is being impacted by recreational boating activity that's not suited to a small and very shallow lake. And that's been the case for a very long time. Lakeshore alterations and dense development with no safeguards for the lake. Those have been longstanding problems, and the town is starting to look at addressing some of that. And then one issue, which is relatively new, is increasing amounts of nitrogen coming into the lake from rainfall. And the agricultural sources are the confined animal feed operations in the area. And that's why you've got, if you remember at Jim's presentation, there was a map of the United States, and just a real red bullseye around this part of North Carolina. And it's the emissions from that confined animal feed operation activity. So this is something that I developed as a conceptual aid, and Jim did not put it in the report, but I think it helps in terms of understanding that there are multiple issues, multiple activities, and multiple entities involved in protecting and monitoring the lake. So the town's focus really needs to be on stormwater and sewer upgrades, and then having shorelines which don't cause water quality problems. And there is a lot of information available on the types of land uses which either help or hinder lake water quality. And so one of the things that is most impactful to a lake is the amount of impervious surface. And there's a rule of thumb that's been developed by looking at data, which indicates that whenever you have more than 10% impervious surface in a watershed, you're going to start to have water quality problems. One of the issues that was mentioned in Jim's report was leaking sewer lines that can collect groundwater, and it winds up going to the wastewater treatment plant instead of continuing to migrate towards the lake. Next, please, Pat. So this again addresses the situation, and this map was included in the report, and this is something that was generated with our stormwater work of a couple of years ago. The one on the left shows the amount of impervious surface in the watershed, and there's quite a lot of it. White Lake's watershed is small. It really focuses on the area around the perimeter of the lake. It's not like there's an inlet with a large watershed, you know, where you could have a lot more nutrients coming in. it's much more localized. And then the pipes and ditches which drain to the lake are shown on the map on the right, and there are over 50 of them. Next, please, Pat. Thank you. Okay, so again, going back in time, there was a series of 3 articles that was written in the Bladen Journal in late 1981, talking about lake conditions declining, and a second one talking about sewer lines drawing off water, which would otherwise be directed towards the lake and groundwater. Again, you can take a look at this on the website and read it at your leisure, but the person that was concerned about that said that at the time some of these pipes were put in, and they were big clay pipes, that the joints weren't sealed properly. And so there were a lot of leaks, long-standing leaks. And so much of phase 2 work that has been done here at the town of White Lake has been addressing that main line along White Lake Drive. And that's where a lot of infiltration has been coming in. And so that's a good thing to get that taken care of. Next, please, Pat. Okay, so going back to this again, some of these things again need to be taken care of by a lot, but as far as I'm concerned, the boating is the issue that generates the most complaints about lake aesthetics. And so if we can do something about that to reduce those impacts, we would be accomplishing a lot. Next, please. So I take a lot of pictures when I come, and these are all taken over at Lake Place in Nathan's Cove. It was beautiful in April. That changed Memorial Weekend, and by July it was as bad as I've seen it over there. And that's sediment. That brown color is sediment that has been churned up from the lake bottom. There's a lot of vegetation and algal mats and things like that too, which start to decompose and smell really bad. All of that was gone by October. And as you know, if you've been out on the lake or out on a dock since the storm in September, it's very clear now again. So going back to what was said before in the COGS report, management of the lake in terms of implementing changes in use or altering activities that take place in and around the lake. There was discussion about doing something about boating to try and mitigate this back in the early 1980s. And for whatever reason, nothing was done. So what's going to be different this time? I think we have an opportunity, and it doesn't help to just point fingers and get excited about things without trying to be reasonable and come up with some solutions and things to do that really have the potential for benefiting the lake and the residents and visitors. So.
Thank you, Diane. And
You want me to answer questions if there are any? No.
We're not. Questions.
thank you, Diane. And I don't know if her mic was on in the very beginning, so I'll just repeat that all of the PowerPoint presentation, in addition to the actual articles, newspaper articles, reports that are in those 10 slides, are all individually listed as well on the website, in case anybody wants to read them a little bit farther, or in case the board wants to spend a little time with them. They're all listed there for your view and pleasure. It's on the very home page. In fact, I think it's labeled, Diane, help me here with it, but it seems like it's labeled Lake Management Workshop Meeting, November 29th. And that includes all. Okay. So it's about a quarter of the page down. And moving along with that question, what's going to be different this time? The town staff has prepared a proposal to state parks, specifically with state parks, because state parks is the agency that we as a community and as a organizational body need to start with from the standpoint of state parks has ownership of this lake. So whatever we are requesting from whatever agency we are requesting, it's important that state parks is at least aware of the request. Some of the specific request items do fall under the jurisdiction and purview of state parks, but as a good partner in this long-term solution and the management of White Lake, we find it very important to include them on any request made. So we're starting with state parks, and it is important to note that in this conversation, there have been a series of action items already taking place around the lake and are continuing to take place, and some that have just started that are separate from this report and proposal, but important to point out. Some of those would be, as Diane mentioned in her presentation, the sewer sanitary work that's going on. We've got roughly $5 million of loan money that the town has invested back into the sewer sanitary system, specifically to reduce inflow and infiltration. That roughly equates to 25% of the sewer collection system that has been rehabbed or replaced, which is a big improvement. In fact, that is a specific action item to continue work on the sanitary sewer system improvements. And furthermore, on that note, the town has also submitted a grant application to continue work under a phase 3 for that sewer project to continue that reduction of the I&I inflow and infiltration. So we're working on that action step currently. Another action step that's listed in the preliminary lake management plan is for the state of North Carolina and the town of White Lake to continue working collaboratively on the future management of the lake, which is where this proposal comes into play. One more action item that I'll call the board and the community's attention to that's listed in our preliminary lake management plan is that the planning board consider several action items to improve various items and quality of life aspects around the lake. These improvements consist of stormwater ordinance proposal and implementation, stronger land use controls, conservation easements, updating the comprehensive land use plan, and other forms of smart development to minimize runoff as much as possible. And to further strengthen the work that the planning board is working on, town staff has also submitted a grant application for a stormwater master plan to study and begin working on implementation for a stormwater collection system that would then in turn move water away from our lake, whereas now it runs towards our lake. So we've got some things going on behind the scenes currently that are important, but as a collective group and as staff is requesting tonight, we want to take another step forward with this proposal to state parks. There's 6 proposal items that have been listed in the actual document, and I'll read all 6 off, and then I'll turn it back over to Mayor Womble for discussion on all 6 items so that we have time to discuss what's in the proposal, that everybody collectively agrees that it needs to be in the proposal, and that we ultimately decide as a board to submit those action items in the proposal to state parks. So number 1 would be an implementation of a moratorium on mooring buoys. Number 2 would be an implementation of a moratorium on the construction of seawalls. Number 3 would be restrictions on boat size and restrictions on boat operational water displacement while being used in the lake. Number 4 would be management of the geese and seagull populations. Number 5 would be implementation of a maintenance agreement for the outlet at Turtle Cove. And number 6 would be implementation of a moratorium on the surface drainage into the lake. Having said that, Mayor, that's all I have on the proposal. I'm certainly open to any questions the board may have. And having said that, if we want to start the discussion on each individual item, we can move forward with that.
All right, I appreciate it, Sean. this has already been sent out to all the board and also Sean sent out, and I assume you received it when it was sent out earlier. We have this letter that's presented for you that we sent out for your review on it. We also have a copy of Diane Larson's presentation. We have the copy of the articles that were referenced and shown in what we had laid out. And I think basically that was it. Also, Terry Hawley had sent in some information to Sean, and we included that in what we sent out. And I assume y'all have had an opportunity to take a look at that on some of the things that she found with interacting with some other folks down here at the lake. And so having said that, you know, what we want to do is we've had our presentation from Lumber River Council of Governments, and taking into account that and the work that staff has done in analyzing that and looking at their proposed action points and the other things that we have been considering for some time, in addition to our sanitary sewer improvements, is basically a listing of 6 items that we want to propose to proceed with in contacting NC State Parks and Recreation. And let me point out that at the beginning of the letter, you know, I understand this is to NC State Parks and Recreation, but we will also be working going forward with the Lumber River Council of Governments, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, the North Carolina Water Resources Commission, and the Wildlife Resources Commission, which are the other state agencies that are involved with this and are referenced in the Lumber River Council of Government reports. So what I wanted to do tonight is so that we can go ahead and move forward with some positive steps on this based upon our study and the feedback we've had. And again, this is by no means a considered a total listing or totally comprehensive listing, but it's things that we feel like we could start with that would hopefully have an impact on the lake, not only on its safety, but it's the clarity of the lake, which we all want to try to reestablish. The first thing, and I'm going to go through these one at a time with the board, and then we'll come back if necessary. We can vote on them one at a time or as a group, but I want to get discussion from you on it. The first is an implementation of a moratorium on mooring buoys. You can see in the letter that we have, I think they had increased by 56%. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I think they're 400 and some. Yeah, that's the 56%, but I think we had 445 buoys right there. And of course, you know, basically the buoys in and of themselves, I don't think hurt anything, but there's no question that they increase the number of boats which are on the lake. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be concerned about. And so let me get any feedback or any questions any of y'all have got in regard to the mooring buoys. Again, not asking that any be removed at this point in time, but just that we put a moratorium on those so we can hopefully have some success in decreasing the number of boats which are readily available on the lake at any one time.
Well, before we get started on line item, I just got some issues I would like to offer, and then I'd be glad to go line item by line. First, I want to thank Sean. I'd asked for him to have like a follow-up, and he's done what I'd asked, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the work Diane Larson's done. I got this day about 11 o'clock, 10:58. With all this information, it was very important. And I didn't open my email about 4 o'clock. I had a pretty hectic day today, been a hectic week. That's a side point. So there's a lot of information for me to read, and I read real slow. But I usually read 2 or 3 times. But some issues I personally did see in this that I don't know if we're not going to address it or we're just not going to. But I hadn't seen a whole lot about the clarity of the water besides the buoys and the boats. I hadn't seen, so one of my biggest concerns is the lake level. It is artificially set 64, bags were there. And I realized we hadn't had rain and we hadn't had a hurricane. We can't control that. I realized I was here in 81, that the lake level was low, and I remember that quite clearly. So with that being said, this is what 64 foot gets you. Here's where the water was at. Here's my photo. That's where we're at, not hitting seawall. This is on the south side. And I like to share that. I've spoken earlier, several occasions. People said the water should be at 66. You're not going to be at 66 with evaporation and with droughts. We're not at 64. We got people can't get their boats in the lake. What they're doing now, they're extending their pier. They're going to eye hooks, taking the platform instead of cradles and get their boat in water. We do have some people fortunate enough that still can access their boat in the water. So this is on the south side. You see where the water had been for years and years. So I didn't really see, I just see about lake water, about the doing the spillway. I think it's great. Chemicals. Is there any kind of chemical treatment? I read this report. Alan was out with no other option. That the end of the discussion there. Is there any other options for clarity? How about the removal of that algae? Are those boats so harmful? Is it breaking it up, causing it to die? What's causing it to grow? What's going to happen? It's just going to continue to grow? Is there dredges? Is there other options we can consider getting that bad stuff out of our lake? That hadn't been addressed in anything. The algae removal, filtration, bury the water, what we can do on that end of it. What I'm seeing we're doing, boat buoys, I like you, I don't see where the boat buoys are really going to affect the water quality. Boating. And this, I don't want to have no argument with nobody, I'd be glad to get to that point as well. You look at people checking in these houses and these motels and these campgrounds, they're bringing boats. They're bringing big ones, they're bringing jet skis. Where are we going to go with regulations? About half the board here probably got boats, don't need to be on that lake. We're going into these criteria. I just don't see at this point where we're really going. Seawalls, I can go with that. Moratorium. I got a problem with buoys, but it's not the buoys creating the water clarity. I got other issues. When the bait loose or not marked, the boat set a buoy, somebody catch their food on the buoy. But I just don't see moving forward the clarity of what we're signing up to do. Tourism, you take out boating, you get your taxes raised up. There's people coming with jet skis, ski boats, what's next? So I'll go line by line. I just wish we had more meat in this proposal or some alternatives versus things that really I don't feel contribute to clarity of the water. And I don't want to argue with nobody. I'm glad Dr. Lawson said we all have different opinions. I got good friends in here, different with me. We have friends on this board that are different with me, but I think the lake level is my biggest concern and what other options we have. And if we need another scientist, get a second opinion, it's like going to a doctor or a lawyer. Sometimes it don't hurt to get a second opinion. With that being said, I'll be glad to go line item by line. And I'll be glad to be photos here for everybody's convenience. See what the lake water, like I said, we didn't hit those seawalls this year. That's
Okay, well, we are going to go line item by line item, but I need to respond to a couple of things that you said, Tim. I'm not arguing with you on it. I just want to give my response. You said issues you didn't see were clarity of the water. Well, hopefully some of these things we're doing will affect the clarity of the water. The implementation on the moratorium on surface drainage into the lake, if we eliminate nutrients coming into the lake, then we're going to help the clarity of the water.
I can go with that.
Yeah, and if we do some type of restriction on boat size or operational water displacement at the lake, that could certainly affect the clarity of the lake because of the boat traffic and the boat stirring it up and causing it to come up to the shore. And you saw the results of that in July. And the implementation of a moratorium on the construction of seawalls can certainly deal with the clarity of the water because the algae doesn't wash up on the shore. It runs into the seawall, it's broken up, it goes back out into the lake. So I would just say that, as I said to begin with, this is not intended as an absolutely comprehensive plan on everything that can be done. But I don't agree that when it's stated that this doesn't affect the clarity of the water. The other thing that's probably more important than that is you made a statement, and I did want to clarify something on that. You said the lake level was set at 64 feet.
Yes.
The lake level in White Lake is not set at 64 feet.
You go over to the sandbags were taken out, and that was sit there, and I've gone back and see where that water was over before we got where it's not overflowing now, but 64 feet. We can bring up some information in the past where we were talking about 64 feet, and that would be the new norm. So I'm just saying, we go over tonight like I've gone, it's not flowing out of it all now, but at 64 feet, it was draining really good.
Well, again, I think where everybody gets that from is, again, nothing's been done to set the lake level at 64 or 65 feet. There was legislation passed a good number of years ago when Turtle Cove was developed that said that on the roads surrounding White Lake, you could not have, and it was by a different measurement at that time, you couldn't dig under those roads at anything below 65 feet mean sea level. And so, again, the state didn't set a level at that time. They said that you can't dig underneath the roads because that could have the problem of draining the lake, and they didn't want to do that. When the state went in and raised the sandbags up, which I would add, that was at our request, that as the lake level increased, that they raised the level of the sandbags in order to retain more water in the lake. And that's exactly what we did. That's what we asked them to do. As long as we're not flooding, piers and things like that, it doesn't matter to me exactly what the level of the lake is, because again, there's nothing that sets a lake level. It's just, and as we go up with the sandbags, and I agree, that's not a perfect solution because it's hard to control things with sandbags. That's the reason that we've got in here that implementation of a maintenance agreement for the outlet at Turtle Cove. If we could put something in there that is better than using sandbags, and we've been talking with Mr. Keith some on that, then by doing that, we would hope to bring up the lake level and keep more in there. We can't help it when there's a drought and when there's evaporation, the lake level is going to drop. I mean, it's just what it just what it does.
Oh, yeah.
But that doesn't prevent us from, we right now, it's not going over the drain because there's not enough water in it to go over the drain. So we don't want to lower it at this time. What we want to do is leave it where it's at, and when it comes up higher, raise the level of the sandbags, and we can keep more water in the lake. If we keep more water in the lake, then the boats are going to stir it up less, and it just seems to me it's better all the way around. You said something about a chemical option, and of course we continue to talk with the state on that. The only reason they let us do something before was because of the cyanobacterial bloom, and that had to do with the safety of the lake because cyanobacteria is capable of producing toxins. It certainly had the added benefit of adding some clarity to the lake. And we have talked with the state about that. At this point, they have not expressed any willingness at all to have any other type of alum treatment. Diane Larson has worked with them some to say, look, we need to go ahead and pre-plan some things. If we have another cyanobacterial bloom, then we need to be in a position, hopefully, to go ahead and proceed without having to have a great delay in it. And Diane continues to work with her group in regard to that. Sean and I, and probably Sean in particular, you said something about mechanical options, have continued to look at whatever mechanical options that we might be able to find if you locate any, and I don't mean this facetiously, if you find something on that, or anybody does, it's out here, you know, if we can find some feasible way of removing algae by mechanical means. When the state first came down and talked with us on it, they gave a little presentation on this also, and they basically ruled out a mechanical option because they didn't know of any mechanical options at that time. I agree with you that if we could find some mechanical option that wouldn't damage the lake any, and we could use that to remove some algae, that would be a good thing. And one other thing I wanted to point out, and we'll get to it in the separate things, but this thing, understand that what we're doing is we're not making any specific requirements to the state. They own the lake. We're not saying, if you talk about restrictions on boat size, we're not saying to them, look, you need to have boats that don't exceed 21 feet or 22 or 26. We're saying restrictions on boat size. We want them to look at that to see if it's something that they believe would be helpful in helping with the algae situation here at the lake. And where that second part comes from on the operational water displacement at the lake, Sean spent a good deal of time today. I had a meeting set up with David DeAndre from White Lake Marina, and we had some different language. David suggested that we use the operational water displacement at the lake because that takes into account the size of the boat, the draft of the boat. It takes into account the use of ballast systems. We didn't want to come in and specifically say something like outlaw ballast. There's a new thing that's come out now, basically a hydrofoil. It can do the same thing that the ballast system can do, but it has the effect of dropping the back of the boat down to a lower level, kick out a higher wake, and it stirs up the bottom of the lake more. So we're asking the state to partner with us in looking at these things to see if there is something that can be done. I don't want to, you know, my family's in the recreational business down here, and I, you know, readily admit we don't want to do anything to harm the recreational and tourism possibilities at the lake. I think White Lake is the primary commercial driver for Bladen County, quite frankly, and I have felt that way for many years. But I want to do it in a safe and responsible manner. And so I think asking the state to look with us at, you know, boat size restrictions, the state may come back and say, well, we don't think restricting the boat size would have any effect on this. There are a lot of studies that are done about boat size, about operational water displacement. We want to look at it with them. So, you know, that's kind of my response to that. I'm not saying that to argue with you, but I mean, that's, that needs to be brought out. Okay, that having been said, let's look at these things on a point by point basis. One, is implementation of a moratorium on mooring buoys. And if y'all don't want to do that, we don't have to do it. I'm just saying that it's one of the things that staff came up with, particularly when we looked at the report that was presented by the Lumber River Council of Governments. And I think it's just fairly much common sense that if you implement a moratorium on mooring buoys to the ones that are there now, you're not going to encourage additional boats permanently moored in the lake during the summertime, and therefore it might help with decrease of the boating traffic. The other thing I would say on that is it sure as heck isn't going to hurt anything. I can't imagine how it would hurt to put an implementation of moratorium on mooring buoys. So we're going to take these one at a time. That's the first one. I'll entertain any comments y'all have got, and we're going to take a vote to see if we want to do that or not.
So does that moratorium mean we limit it to the number we had last year
The number that are in existence now.
in existence right now?
Yes.
And does that fluctuate much during the season?
No, those mooring buoys are really put down, well, not, can't really say on a permanent basis, but they drive the stake down into the lake and then attach the buoy on, and you have to get the permission of the adjoining waterfront landowner in order to be able to put those out there, and then have to go to the state to get a permit on them. And so we would just be asking that while we study that and take a look at it, and I don't know, all the state may come back and say, well, we just don't think that's going to have any effect on it, but we would like for them to look at that with us. Again, I go back to what I said a minute ago, what in the world could it possibly hurt? I mean,
so this process, we suggested to the state that this is what we'd like to do, and then they give us feedback where we can actually make the determination that we're going to go through with it and do this, or we.
Yeah, because it's not.
So it's our
again,
decision, basically, whenever the state gets back with us is.
Well, let me start out by saying is, not getting too elemental with it, but obviously the state owns the lake. We're telling the state in here, just like it states in this letter, the town of White Lake is making the following request. The NC State Parks and Recreation is a partner for long-term sustainability and functionality. One, implementation of a moratorium on mooring buoys. So we're not asking that the mooring buoys that are out there be removed. We're asking that there just be no more added at this time. So in part of our overall proposal, we can look to see if hopefully this would have a positive effect on the lake. The state could come back and talk to us and say, well, no, we're not going to put a moratorium on it. Or they may come back and say, well, that sounds like a reasonable request, and we'll consider that for a while. Although it doesn't tie in directly with it. The last bullet point, number 6, is implementation of well, let's go to the second, implementation of a moratorium on the construction of seawalls. Again, it doesn't require anything to be taken out at this point. It just says, we want you to, we're not asking the state to take them out. We're just saying we don't want any more permits issued for them at this point. And let's continue to look at how it's having an effect on the lake. The same thing with an implementation on number 6 of a moratorium on surface drainage into the lake. We got about 51 outlets that go into the lake now, and we think that adds nutrients in a substantial degree to the lake. So why not eliminate any further ones coming in at this point? Again, it can't possibly hurt, and hopefully it would help. I'm not saying to you that, in the future at some point, Mike could go forward and say, that we need to eliminate some of these surface drainages into the lake. The state may come back and say that. I'm just, right now, it's not against the state regulations to do that. So does that kind of answer
Yeah,
what you, yeah, okay.
Well, that's two I can go with. The construction of the seawalls and the drainage. So
Okay, well, we're gonna come back and vote on each one of them in just a little bit. Again, I've already mentioned the implementation of moratorium on the construction of seawalls and how that ties in. The restrictions on boat size and operational water displacement at the lake. Again, we got that operational water displacement term from David DeAndre. And we're not telling the state, we can't tell the state, look, you got to limit the boats to a certain length, a certain draft, a certain amount of water displacement, use of ballast, not use of ballast. But that's the things we're wanting to discuss with them. And so we want them to look at that because there is information out there that the state has access to, that we have access to also. And we know was as shallow as the lake is, that when you use, you take in several, it's a large amount of water. It can be several thousand pounds that the ballast can take in, and it drops the bottom of the boat down and gets it closer to the bottom of the lake, and it's going to stir up the lake more than it would if it wasn't that close to the bottom of the lake. Management of the geese and seagull populations are things we have talked about for a while. Again, I can't sit here and tell you that that's going to make a difference in the lake. But again, we want the state to look at it with us. They've indicated in the past they would be willing to do it. I don't know if there's anything they can do about the seagulls. With the geese, they do have some programs for being able to do some things with them. And so we want to get the state's input in regard to that. And of course, I've already talked about an implementation of a maintenance agreement for the outlet at Turtle Cove, which we continue to work on. And the main reason we want to do that is so, quite frankly, when we get the lake level up, we can keep it up. I mean, if we have a way from blocking it from flowing out there, then we're going to be able to increase the level of the lake. And we can't put enough water in it to increase it, but as long as we have it an outlet set at a certain height, then we let it fill up to that height. And when it gets up there, if we want to take it up higher, then we can. Again, as I stated before, there is no lake level set for the lake. There simply isn't. And so that's another thing that we can do. And of course, it's been mentioned also, and the state has mentioned it to me in the past, is, when if the lake is absolutely full and we got a hurricane coming in, do we want to do something to lower it some to get some drainage out of the lake so that the lands around the lake don't flood as bad. So, it gives us that capacity to be able to control it. So, again, I've already mentioned a moratorium on surface drainage into the lake, which again, to me, seems kind of like a no-brainer and it certainly could help as long as it reduces the amount of nutrients that are going into the lake. I think I'll kind of close my comments by saying, I think the most important thing to keep in mind, as I stated to begin with, this is not an end-all be-all comprehensive plan, but you've got to start somewhere. We made a really good start with burying the progress that we're doing. We've done $4 or $5 million on sanitary sewer improvements, and it is our hope that will help eliminate some of the nutrients going into the lake. And we're wanting to do another $3 million worth of work on that. and specifically look at laterals, which are close to the lake and could possibly have more effect on that if we can get some additional fund. So we have taken that step and are continuing to take that step to see what we can do. I mean, the name of the game is either removing nutrients from the lake or keeping nutrients from getting into the lake. And so we're going to be coming with additional things. This is not everything that's included in the Lumber River Council of Governments report. There are other things, there are other action items, but we wanted to start with not only the wastewater system, but with the things that are directly related to what state parks and the Wildlife Resources Commission and Water Resources Commission does as far as what they have in control of White Lake. And quite frankly, I don't want to, overdo this on it, but I want to show the state that we are trying to do these things to remove nutrients from the lake. And my hope is it would possibly open up some avenues for us doing some other things and showing them that we're doing our part with it. Could you look at some other things such as the possibility of an additional alum treatment? Because I don't know, I can't sit here and tell you that these things are or are not going to affect the nutrients going into the lake to the extent that it affects the clarity. It is my hopeful belief that it will. I mean, that's the point of doing this. Why, we want the lake to be safe, but we want it to be clear again too. And that we all have that common goal. So this, my friends, is just a starting point. This is the first step that we're planning on taking after our wastewater steps that we've taken. And I'll say just one other thing in regard to that. When we're talking about a moratorium on surface drainage into the lake, we're not talking about those two primary outfalls. They're maintained by Department of Transportation. But I want y'all to know that we are looking at both of those outfalls and looking at trying to see if we can get some engineering done to either divert that away from the lake or divert it into some type of retention pond. We believe, some land that could be available for doing that. And if we're able to do that, again, that eliminates probably a fairly substantial amount of nutrients going into the lake. And again, by no means is what you're doing tonight any limitation on the other things that we're looking at doing. It's just, we need to put some boots on the ground. We need to have a positive starting point, and we need to, I think, go forward with these things to see, hopefully it'll have a positive effect for us, and we're not going to slow down on working on some other things that we will be bringing to you that puts more boots on the ground and tries to do more things for the clarity of the lake. I'm getting too long-winded here and I'll stop after this, but in the Lumber River Council of Governments reports, it says that, they didn't see any real need in further hydrogeological studies. Well, that's their opinion on it. I'm not saying that, Sean and I talk about it about every day, certainly on a weekly basis. And I'm not saying that there won't be something brought to you that has further studies in regard to that, in connection with our stormwater plan that we're getting the money to take a look at. So, all of these things are on the table, and all of them we're trying to move forward with. So that's about what I've got to say on it. And what I want to do is go ahead and see if we can move forward tonight. And I'm going to take these one at a time, and you can vote for them or against them at a public forum, and folks know where you stand. The first one is implementation of a moratorium on mooring buoys. I would at this time entertain a motion to implement or to request the state, and that's the way in all of these, that they look at the implementation of a moratorium on mooring buoys, limiting it to the number that currently exists, on the lake at this time.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, next is implementation of a moratorium on the construction of seawalls. I would entertain a motion that we approve that to send as a request to the NC State Parks and Recreation.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Item number 3, restrictions on boat size and operational water displacement at the lake, that we would ask the state to look at that in conjunction with us and give to us their recommendations on it.
So moved.
Motion second.
Second.
Any discussion?
I strongly opposed to that. I think we need to take a pause. We're talking about somebody regulating, we're talking about time. I heard not have boating on nights, maybe not weekends. I just see this a recreational lake. I would like to take a pause and move on to these other ones, but this is our mainstay, one of our for tourism. That's what we're on this lake. And who's gonna control it? Who's gonna say who's what? And I just think we're from can of worms when you let's start regulating. That's how I feel.
Okay, there's been a motion and second. Any further discussion?
I think it's kind of tough on the guy that's spent that money on it, and then next year you tell him, well, you can't have it here again. You can't have it. That your boat's not allowed on the lake anymore.
Well, my only point is, Mike, we're not telling anybody that. We're not telling I'm not telling the state. What we're asking them to do is look at the issue of boat size. And again, what we got from David DeAndre, operational water displacement at the lake. I'm not telling anybody they got to take the boat off the lake. I don't even know that legally, if somebody's already got a boat out there, I don't know that you could make them take them off the lake, even if the state said so. It would probably be an illegal use of eminent domain, but yeah, I'm just wanting them to look at that to see if that could help with all this algae getting stirred up and washing up to the shoreline and affecting the clarity of the lake. So I understand what you're saying completely. I'm just saying that's not the way I'm looking at it.
And the reason that I have made a motion is because the way I'm looking at it is I want to get feedback from the state to say, this is what we suggest. And then we can do.
And that's exactly what I'm looking at. Yeah, I agree.
Are they gonna say that, or are they gonna say this is what you're gonna do?
No, as said before, we're not telling them this is what you're gonna do.
No, I'm talking about them telling us what we're gonna do. You know, if you say,
Well, they could tell us what
I know
they're gonna
regardless,
do at any point.
I understand that.
I understand that too, that
I just want
Or
to
they
get
get-
there is a
there.
risk of it opening up a can of worms. The state tells us exactly,
Yeah.
but they haven't. You know, I don't view the state as telling us going, try to dictate how we're going to run our town. That's my opinion, but I know stranger things.
Well, and I don't either, but I just want to look at the issue and see if they think, it could this have an effect. I mean, common sense tells me it would have an effect on the clarity of the lake. The state may disagree with that. I don't know, but we're not going to know unless we ask them to look at it. So again, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
I vote aye. It passes. Next is management of the geese / seagull populations. I would entertain a motion that we present that to NC State Parks and Recreation for their response and input in regard to that.
So moved.
The motion, second.
I'll second, and the seagulls are back. From my peer, I videotaped it, they're back with a vengeance. Also have, article, which I'm sure y'all seen it, about Jordan Lake, the amount these birds are eating in these landfills that come in here and keep in our lake. My understanding, nitrogen levels stronger in the middle lake than on the edge or brim of the lake where the pipes are going into. That's the part I want to talk about doing. You want to abandon a boat, it's going to turn that mess up. It's been churned up. Boats, we had less boat traffic. I think we're not tackling the real issues. But yeah, it's all about, I don't know who's gonna regulate, get the birds off. I think if we can't ride our boats out there and run them off, I'm American get news.
Okay, I know we got a motion second on that. Was there any? I don't think did we actually take a vote on this?
No.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign. Next is implementation of a maintenance agreement for the outlet at Turtle Cove. I would entertain a motion that we request the state to look at that with us.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? Not all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Last one is implementation of a moratorium on surface drainage into the lake that we asked them to take a look at installing a moratorium in regard to that.
So
And a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I was gonna say one thing. I'm for that. But if that's the case, what are we gonna do? Like the guy tears a house down beside you and he throws in 20 loads of dirt and then it all runs in your house, in your yard. I think that's something we need to look at. Because I think that's where a lot of problems are. I know that happened in my neighborhood.
Mhm.
He didn't have a pipe there. Somebody come in, built, and water starts running in his house. He's got a slab house and the water started running in his house. What's he gonna do?
Commissioner, I would just add that at the planning board right now, we're discussing the stormwater ordinance as well as land use controls that would address that on both accounts.
I mean, I'm for it, but.
Yeah.
But I just.
And that's a valid point because we're flat down here. And that's the reason we're looking at the stormwater plan because it's really not enough to just tell people don't drain something into the lake. You've got to give them a reasonable alternative.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do is see what we can set up with drainage that drains away from the lake instead of going into the lake. Okay.
Have we been able to offer any reasonable alternatives to the other 48 or so inlets into the lake? Or shut them off?
We have identified them and we will certainly work on seeing what, if anything, we can get people to agree to shut off. We can't shut it off because state regulations permit draining into the lake right at this point. So that's the reason I'm asking for a moratorium on, allowing.
I mean, we had a lot of people here that were saying they would do whatever they could do. I wonder if those were either any private landowners or their business owners that we could just address that way and find a reasonable way to move that water away.
Mhm.
And we could certainly prepare a proposal from staff or from the board to our community to ask for that.
When we know where they're at though, right?
We do.
We can address those areas. I mean, the
Yes, sir.
property owners, I guess.
Yeah, we've got them mapped out. In fact, they were in one of those slides in
Yeah.
Diane's presentation tonight, to show you.
That's what wants to address them
Sure.
particularly.
Did we have a motion and second on that? I think we did.
We did.
Any further discussion in regard to that item? If not, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. So those 6 items are approved. We're going to go ahead and present the letter that it'll be updated, but the November 8th letter that we've got. And it will include those items. And we're also at the same time updating the state on everything else that we're doing and try to continue to do to partner with them to help make our lake as clear as we can, as soon as we can. And at the same time, keep it safe for folks. All right, that's what I had on the agenda tonight. I don't think there are any further. We just had that one matter tonight. So at this point, that is the end of this meeting. We have an open forum as we do on all of our regular call meetings. It's 3 minutes per person. We ask you abide by the time limitation. And anyone who wishes to address the board, you have a period of 3 minutes to do so, and you'll be recognized at this time.
Alan Pittman, first, I'd like to commend.
Alan, let me get you a microphone. Oh, it's right there.
Got it. Is it done?
Just tap. So we got it on.
Okay, over recording. Well, first off, I'd like to commend the board. You're working with the state. We're going on almost 5 years since it was sprayed, and we're now taking the first step to work with the state. I commend you for actually taking this step 5 years later. Commend also that we're working on the sewage. There are a lot of folks that believe that some of the nutrients are actually a result of the sewage that has been filtering into the lake through the groundwater. There's a lot of experts that believe that. Let me get back to a couple of things. You saw the picture. I mean, you saw there was a drought in 81, 82. I have presented to this board pictures of the clarity of the lake, and some were taken during that drought. The point being the lake was clear. We can talk about the lake was down, but the lake was clear at that time. We talk about removal of the algae. We talk about boats. There's some experts that say if we've got 4-point pH in the lake, we could care less about boats stirring up stuff. I also have some pictures from, I have to go back and find out when, but it shows ruts going from piers all the way out to the poles. Matter of fact, I saw these aerial photographs we took, and I was wondering what they are, and then realized these are ruts from boats way back, small boats, because they go down, they create a rut. You could see those, but the water was clear. If it's all, this is going to be all boats, then let's look at the lake in January and February. Is the lake green, or is it going to be crystal clear? Now, I'm not talking about the shore, whether it's only 6 feet, 6 inches deep. Let's go out the middle. Let's see if it's clear that we had before. Just other notes talking about the height of the water. The legislation actually is for 66 feet minimum. 66 feet is what it is. Talking about mechanical devices. I'm not an expert, but I just Googled a little bit. There's a sonic floating device that kills algae. It's used in a lot of water treatment plants and such. I don't know the cost. I sent that to a couple of people on the council, but there are mechanical devices to start removing algae from the lake. We talk about seagulls, and I must be wrong on this because give Diane credit. I believe she got an expert in here years ago to look at the seagull problem, and evidently seagulls don't poop in the lake is what I understood. And so everybody forgot about seagulls at that time. But again, we keep chasing rabbits around. Let's look at the algae that's in the lake. Let me also say, you're talking about the 2 drains, the inflow. I understood many years ago that one of the owners of that property said you can do whatever you want to divert it. I have a letter back in 2016 when I was starting to try to get something done. I gave a copy to Diane. This is from a representative from BOT. We're going to try to check with DOT. This individual said, because one of the things was that DOT had created problems. This individual with responsibility with DOT said, if you can show me that our pipes have an impact on the water of White Lake, we will move the pipes free of charge. That's never been done. anyway, I just ask, let's emphasize, quit chasing rabbits. Let's look at the algae in there, and the sewage may be the key. I commend you, and let's get into phase 3 and anything else. Sean, I do have a question though. If we do all phases, what percentage of all the sewage pipes are we fixing?
So all 3 phases would be roughly 35% of the entire collection system, but I think it's almost 60% of memory serves of the main collection system, which is the biggest pipe and where we see the most I&I.
I got you. All right. Thank y'all.
All right, anyone else?
Harry Hawley. It is very disappointing for y'all to ask for citizens' comments. You have citizens here, and y'all did not want to hear anything we had to say before y'all voted. I mean, you might as well be in a closet somewhere. Or is it just a dictatorship? We elect you all. Excuse me. We elect y'all. And we should have a voice.
We got your letter in that you sent in, and I acknowledge that, appreciate the work you did on it. We sent it out to all the commissioners.
But as y'all were discussing, there were people in the audience who could have contributed comments or information that wasn't in what I sent you. I just feel like y'all really don't want to hear us. Very disappointing.
Sure you are. Okay. That's anyone else? I said, I'm sure you are at this point. Anyone else wish to speak?
Hey, I'm Jonathan Langston. I wanted to know, we've got to control the controllables with what we're doing for the quality of the lake and stuff. One of my questions was for the groundwater leakage through the sewer system, we've got to have some kind of numbering system to say, like how many gallons are we pumping out of the water towers and stuff versus what's the numbers that we're treating. So do we have those? I don't need to know those statistics now, but just to say, are we keeping track of those statistics? So that way we can go to the grant money to say, hey, we changed out these many mains. In our next grant for those laterals, we want to make even more improvements to kind of give that, that grant writing to say like, hey, we're really making an impact on the groundwater inflow.
Oh, absolutely. We measure those statistics monthly for water and sewer. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. And then, again, controlling the controllables, in Dr. Laurenstein's presentation, one of the 3 things that she said was, that was kind of newer was the impact of the nitrogen inflow into the lake. And I think we kind of spin round and around, kind of like the doctor to say, there's a difference between analyzing what's wrong or what's the cause versus the symptoms, and the water quality is definitely a symptom. The lake level is definitely, an issue. Boats stirring up the bottom of the lake is an issue for sure for the turbidity of the lake and stuff. But the algae is growing because it's getting nutrients from the rainwater. So one of the things that I would like to see in a letter to somebody, whoever it is, to what we can do to limit the nitrogen that's going into the rainwater, because that wasn't really kind of thing. And I think that's a goal that we could go to. And again, it's this juggling thing of our agricultural business in Bladen County, Sampson County, Columbus County. I mean, it's a state issue as well. And, North Carolina is definitely big in poultry, hogs, turkeys. So I'm not trying to kill any farmers. For sure, but at the same time, maybe there's something that we can do to limit the nitrogen that's actually coming into the rainwater, because we can't control the rain, right? So we can't control those, but we can control the controllables, which would be keeping good stats. The buoy stuff, the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, so NCDCR, did have those. They actually have changed some of the rules back in October. And so they actually have already proposed limiting buoys, mooring buoys and seawalls and different things like that. So that's actually already out there in the works. And I'd like to see, the board kind of address those proposals that they've already proposed is kind of in line with what we're trying to do, but they've already proposed some stuff, and I think that's something that we need to kind of talk about as well. And boat traffic, stormwater runoff is definitely something I'm looking forward to getting and helping with the planning board to talk about, because I think that's a big issue as well that we need, that we can control. The town can control the stormwater runoff. The town can control a lot of those other things, and that's about it.
All right, thanks, sir. Anyone else wish to address the board?
If you don't mind, just a follow-up or two. I don't see this as a one-way street. And so, you know, saying that the board wants to engage with state parks and other agencies on issues, it's not that interested parties can't be involved. And we talked about this several years ago, having, you know, groups work on particular issues and things. And we've been reactive, I guess, and that means that we have not had the focus to really get into the weeds on issues and talk with people in a reasonable way about what might be possible. And so, you know, that's based on what you said, Terry. So I hope you won't stop engaging, but do want to speak to a couple of comments that you made, Tim. You have said repeatedly that lake levels are your major concerns, and you said tonight it doesn't hurt to get a second opinion. Well, we have gotten opinions for many decades, and the hydrogeologist who Jim Perry hired to work on the report reviewed all of that information, and there was hydrogeological information in the 1982 report that I referenced tonight. So it's over and over and over again. We have learned a lot about why the lake levels vary, and it's based on the amount of rainfall. And to the issue that you mentioned, Goldston, if we get the lake level up, we can keep it up. It's again, it's not the Turtle Cove outlet that's regulating the lake level. What we heard from Peter Zamora when Shank and Zamora did their work, the town paid for them to study it. Peter Zamora said there's a lot more groundwater leaving the lake than entering the lake. And so it depends on the level of the water table, whether or not a large amount of water is exiting the lake into the groundwater along the western side of the lake, but it tends to flow from east to west, just the way the surface water does. And when the lake level is low and the water table is low, there's going to be more water leaving the lake. And so the month of October, how much did it rain? 0.2 of an inch. How much did the lake drop? 4 inches. And so we can't control that. We can't keep the water. We can try and block up any surface outlet, but we can't do anything about groundwater flow. So I know it's frustrating, but we've just got to recognize that we've got a lake in which there's a variable lake level, and we need to understand that and use the lake accordingly. So thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Anyone else wish to speak?
Now just respond. Diane, I appreciate the work you're doing, being here, and what you said is, you're right. Just to evaporation, get a little bit of, we so we need a hurricane, maybe just a tropical one. The lake levels to rise and fall. But when we took those bags out and bring that lake level down, and put the bags back in at 94 feet, and the water was still running out. Now, it's still set there today. I think the bags are up just a little bit low, higher. but it will be nice when we do have a rain event. I reckon we're in the dry season, so our lake level's probably a lot lower this coming season, as we have a whole lot of snow. But yeah, it's gonna evaporate, and with droughts, it's gonna fluctuate. And I'm sure what those scientists said, I'm not disputing it. And I'm saying we either need to have the control, but so we can capture when we do have a rain event. Right now, we're not capturing anything, so we're really saying the same thing, we're not disagreeing. And I've just seen you have done a great job for us, but maybe sometimes where you're leaning, going towards about voting. I'm saying, let's get rid of this out. What can we do there? So I think we're on the same team. I'm not just with anyone, but I maybe want to take a little more aggressive action than where we've been going. And just saying the boat buoys and the seawalls, I like seawalls and take them out and birds, but I'm not here to argue with you, like you said earlier, but that's going up at the lake. I do have some history as well.
Well, for a long time, I think we didn't measure the lake levels and rainfall, and now we are correlating the two of them. And so, you know, it's cause and effect, and that's.
We like nobody in Springs.
Yeah, well,
But that's a topic for another time.
Groundwater and you know, Jim went into detail, and Jenkins Moore's report went into detail. It's all part of the surficial aquifer, and so the level of the surficial aquifer, or otherwise known as water table, varies also. And we certainly can't control
I
that.
know, I had a scientist from Mississippi, I spent my own, but he said something's happened to the pressure. So, I mean, I don't want to go relitigate that, but like I said, we appreciate all your.
All right, thank you, Diane. Anyone else wish to speak? If not, there are no other items to address at the meeting tonight. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion second, any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign.